Just as many questions as we had yesterday, but I think the key questions as it relates to the investigation really are why did this plane descend rather rapidly, a controlled descent, programmed descent, but why did it descend rather rapidly from 38,000 feet down to 6,000 feet, and why did the crew members not talk at all to air traffic control?
NBC News correspondent Tom Costello on MSNBC's Morning Joe this morning, expanding on the many questions that remain after that Germanwings Airbus crashed yesterday in the French Alps.
Yeah, that crash left 150 people presumed dead. It's currently being investigated. A damaged black box has been discovered. Officials are optimistic that they'll be able to retrieve the recorded data from it.
For more on this troubling story, we welcome in aviation expert Danny Wright of D&D Aviation. Danny, thanks for Skyping in from Atlanta. The biggest question right now seems to me is this unexplained descent. What could have caused this plane to go into such a descent?
Well, you could have a frozen stab could have created it. The stab is the horizontal stabilizer at the top of the tail. The interesting question to me actually started when they were coast in over France. They were currently cruising at 38,000 feet. They'd been there about 90 seconds when they started a descent. My question is twofold related to the cockpit. One, what were their drift down procedures in the event of an engine failure, which we all do when we're flying over mountains or ocean area. Number two is there were two major airports that were close by. One, obviously, Nice, which was the farthest one away, but yet closer than the crash site. The other one was Marseille in France. It's a perplexing question, to say the least.
And what would cause someone not to use those other airports? In your mind, you had to have been speculating a little bit. Why wouldn't they choose to do that?
I have no concept of why they wouldn't. The drift down procedure would also require them to have already pre-established alternate airports in the event of an emergency. And since those airports were so close and their descent started but actually just before they crossed the coastline, it's still perplexing to me why we're not having any communication from the cockpit, number one, to ATC to declare an emergency or an engine failure or anything of that nature. And the aircraft descending at 3,000 feet a minute is not exorbitant at all. In fact, it's a normal descent, and passengers, if it's done correctly, probably wouldn't even realize it. If we have a catastrophic decompression, we're taught to descend the aircraft as quickly as possible down to a minimum of 25,000 feet, hopefully trying to get down to 15,000 feet. At 25,000 feet, the passengers can breathe, even if the oxygen system did not kick in.
Danny, as we're looking at some of the footage from the French Alps with the rescue and now really the recovery teams on hand, we understand the black box has been recovered, one of two, and apparently it's damaged. Would that create more questions than give us answers, in your opinion?
Well, we have two quote-unquote black boxes. They're actually orange. The cockpit voice recorder was recovered yesterday. And hopefully we will have some cockpit information later on, about another 24 to 48 hours. The flight data recorder being damaged, currently by regulation in the United States on that aircraft, it would have to record a minimum of 88 parameters by regulation, but it records more than that. But 88 parameters of what actually is going on in the aircraft. Even though the exterior of the box is damaged, that does not mean the interior part of the box is damaged, and we still can recover data.
So, Danny, I want to ask you, there were reports that the plane was actually grounded 24 hours prior to this flight. We're also hearing today that many of these pilots for this particular airline are refusing to fly. They're actually citing personal reasons. What does this indicate to you? Is the A320 safe?
Remember one thing, Lufthansa, this is the first accident in Lufthansa history. The A320, one takes off every 2 seconds around the clock, around the world. It is an extremely safe aircraft. The problem we have is when in the event of an incident or an accident, it is me that's going to strap my keister into the seat of the aircraft I want to know what's going on. So I want as much information as possible. Them refusing to fly, I think, is more of a hesitation to find out what has really gone on with the aircraft in the previous maintenance. Now, the aircraft was grounded the day before, but only for a landing gear issue, a nose wheel steering issue. And that's not uncommon. If we don't have nose wheel steering, even though we have transitional thrust capabilities of steering the aircraft, it is still a grounding item where we'd like to know what's going on, and maintenance would have to address it to see if the aircraft is safe for flight. In both the United States and in Europe, a mechanic literally puts his career and his license on the line when he releases the aircraft. So maintenance safety issues are usually not prevalent in these cases.
2 minutes remain here, Danny. We're seeing some footage of German Wings, the economy carrier for Lufthansa, that, of course, the A320 was the crash yesterday. With about 1:45 left, not ruling anything else out, but what do you think about the specter of terrorism or some sort of foul play?
I don't think it can be ruled out at this point in time. I don't think we have enough information, and we won't until we get to the cockpit voice recorder. The fact that the flight crew is not speaking at all to ATC is perplexing, but not completely out of line. If they're dealing with issues such as a electrical fire in the cockpit, the checklist to deal with that is extensive. And they would be very, very busy trying to do that scenario. So I think there's too many scenarios at this point in time for us to actually say it was definitely not terror or it was terror. We don't know. And I think this is where we have to go, is a little more information. And I think the first piece of information that'll tell us the best about terrorism would definitely be the cockpit voice recorder.
30 seconds left, Danny, 30 seconds. With all the avionics and computers, conceivable somebody could have hacked in? Is that something that should be checked on?
That's a good point.
No, it's not at that stage yet. We are getting to the stage where computer hacking can occur on an aircraft. It has been touched on, but both Boeing and Airbus and the rest of these organizations have done extensive work to ensure that you can't transmit into the aircraft in that capacity.
Fair enough. We'll have to leave it there, and I appreciate your insights on that. Danny Wright, we'll be talking to you again in the days ahead. Right now, a Newsmax Now update.